Okay.
30 minutes.
Since we're live.
Live and direct.
For those jumping onto the stream, we'll get started in about 30 seconds. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Damola Ogunnipe, and I am one of the co-founders and the CEO of Civic Eagle. Super excited to have you all joining us today. If you're watching us live or if you're watching the recast of this on YouTube, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about preparing for legislative session in a pandemic. 2020 has been a crazy year. We all know that, but the pandemic's not over, and states are adapting how they're operating their legislature in 2021 as well, as we continue to combat the pandemic across the country. So at Civic Eagle, we've done some research over the last month and a half about how each state is going to be adapting and optimizing themselves for a mostly virtual and remote legislature and session. And we're going to talk about the challenges that we're anticipating folks like you, policy professionals, lobbyists, advocates, are going to face in 2021. A little bit about Civic Eagle. We are on a mission to harness the power of technology in order to improve and increase democratic participation for all people. Our flagship product, In View by Civic Eagle, is specifically built and tailored for advocacy groups and for government relations teams and policy professionals, helping you discover, analyze, and collaborate on legislation and your legislative agenda across the board. So we'll talk more about our product, more about what we have to offer. But before we get started, I want Chantira and Shannon over at the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce to introduce themselves. They're going to participate in this conversation. So Chantira, please go ahead, take it away with your introduction.
Wonderful. Good day, everyone. As Damola mentioned, I'm Chantira Hardy. I am also one of the co-founders at Civic Eagle. I'm really excited to have this conversation. My day job at Civic Eagle is focused on strategy and operations, and just really making sure that we're building an amazing product with an amazing team. And so I know, as Damola mentioned, that the difficulties of 2021 have just come at us just full steam ahead, and many families struggling to navigate all that's happening with the pandemic. We've seen a racial reckoning, and all of these things are just at a head, and policy is still moving. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation with Shannon to tell you a little bit more about the research that we've done, and just hope that you walk away with a few gems that will keep you engaged in public policy, and that you'll see we still can move just really good policy in order to change people's lives. So I'm excited for the conversation.
All right, appreciate it, Chantira. And Shannon, go ahead and please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Shannon Watson. I am the Director of Public Affairs for the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. In that job, I deal with the public policy, anything political, campaign, strategic communications, media relations, the lobbying, all of those put together. So I'm very happy to be part of this conversation, and very happy to have Civic Eagle as a partner in our work.
Awesome. Thank you both for the introductions. So why are we here today? What are we actually talking about? So like I mentioned earlier, Civic Eagle, our research team, has went and really dug in over the last month and a half to figure out how each state across the country is adapting to a mostly virtual, mostly remote legislative session. Now, because of that, there's going to be some challenges that you as a policy professional are going to need to overcome. So we've identified some of those really important challenges, and we're going to discuss how to, again, overcome those and best practices to be able to manage, again, a mostly virtual, mostly remote 2021 legislative session. So you're going to be able to find the full version of our report at the website that's going to be at the bottom here in the banner. So please go ahead and visit that website, learn.civiceagle.com/prepare, and you'll be able to download the full report. Today's conversation is going to be a little bit more high level, some key takeaways. Again, a conversation between Chantira and Shannon discussing how she's preparing for 2021. But before we jump into that conversation, I want to kind of set the tone. What are the challenges that we've discovered you're going to face in 2021? We've grouped those challenges into two big buckets. The first one being communication and the second one being collaboration. Now, the first main challenge within communication is clarity. Identifying which version of a bill is in play, who's involved, where it is, all of that is going to be incredibly difficult to discern. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well and give you some best practices on how to solve that challenge in 2021. The second challenge within communication is timeliness. Bills will be moving fast. We saw that in 2020 where many bills were voted on sometimes before even being posted, or maybe just a few minutes before being posted. And that trend is going to continue in 2021. There's going to be special sessions across the board, just like we had in 2020. So how do you prepare for that? How are you adapting to the speed in which legislation is going to be moving? And then the third challenge within communication is impact. Legislators aren't going to feel your physical presence in 2021. We know that. Most legislatures are not going to allow the public, or at least a limited capacity or limited amount of the public at the Capitol. So the legislatures are not going to feel that physical presence that you have in 2021. So how are you going to actually be able to communicate and have impact with lawmakers? We'll talk about that. Now, the second big bucket of challenges falls underneath collaboration, with the first challenge being building relationships with lawmakers. So like I mentioned earlier, most legislatures are allowing legislators to be in person, but are limiting and potentially fully eliminating public in-person participation. So how are you going to be able to continue to build those relationships with lawmakers in a very impactful way? We'll talk about that. The second challenge within collaboration is building relationships with partners. Now, like I mentioned, legislatures not allowing public participation for the most part, maybe in a limited capacity. So how are you going to build alliances and coalitions? That's going to be difficult. We're not going to see the rallies and days at the capitals that get people energized and excited about issues. So how do you build those relationships and get people excited, get your stakeholders, your community excited and rallying around issues and building those partnerships and coalitions? We'll talk about how to address that challenge. And then the third challenge within collaboration is identifying opposition, getting a sense of the position of other organizations, lobbyists, advocates. What is their position, their take on a bill, right? Where are they focused on? What issue areas are they focused on? How do you collaborate even with opposition and being able to identify and then work with them to pass meaningful legislation that impacts you and your stakeholders? So we'll talk about that as well. So again, two main buckets of issues, of challenges: communication and collaboration, with specific challenges inside of them. Again, you can download the full report on Civic Eagle at civiceagle.com. We'll share that website again later on. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into the Q&A between Chantira and Shannon Watson over at the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce, where Shannon is going to share a little bit about how she's planning to manage 2021, some of the opportunities she's seen stemming from the work in 2020, and how that's going to impact her work in 2021. Shannon, Chantira, please go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. And thank the team at Civic Eagle. We got some very amazing interns that put all this work together, did all of that work to call all 50 state legislatures to get an understanding of what it is that they plan to do and just get their reaction to how best that they achieved, I believe, one of the #1 goals around public policy, which is access. And so I'm really excited to talk with you, Shannon, this afternoon, and really just want your take. You are just an expert in navigating a number of stakeholders, a number of issues. And so really want to be able to just provide folks a glimpse into your world and how you plan to prepare in the midst of a pandemic. So if you can just start, I know you introduced yourself. I would love for you to just tell us a bit more about what the chamber does and what it is that really drives your mission to do this work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time and the invitation. It's always good to talk with partners. And yeah, we're in a really interesting situation. I think unprecedented is going to be the most used and most overused word of 2020. So hopefully we can shed that in 2021. So the Chamber of Commerce, the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce, we're a business advocacy organization. And chambers of commerce have been around for a really long time. Historically, they were a bunch of barons of industry who get together and figure out what's good for the business community and support initiatives. And while that's still sort of, that's the basis, that's our history, we spend more time, instead of talking about business itself, is we talk about the employer community. So our members are for-profit, but also nonprofit organizations, governments, and we serve the entire East Metro of the Twin Cities. But we also have a regional focus. We have members in the West Metro, across the state, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, all over the place. So we do have more of a regional focus. We've got about 1,700 active and affiliate members, and that ranges from multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations to literally garage startups. So that means we have a lot of variety, a lot of diversity, but also lots of differing priorities, which actually I like to look at it as loads of opportunity.
I love that. And so it becomes just this balancing act to make sure you understand what are the needs of so many different interests. And so being able to be that voice, I mean, you're literally the megaphone for a number of different industries doing work.
Right. It's a big responsibility and also a heavy lift sometimes.
Yeah. Because every industry is experiencing things at different speeds, at different levels of impact. And so really hard to do that. So as you think about, 2020, as we said, is unprecedented, but I'm pretty sure that some of your issues haven't changed. What are some of your top issues that you all work on with respect to, being there for your members and the employers? I really appreciate you using that word, employers, because that speaks to that connection to community.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things. We are a membership organization. People, pay us money to advocate for their interests. But we really have extended the focus. We care very much about the business community in general, whether they pay us dues or not. And then also how that affects community. If you don't have a healthy business community, you don't have a healthy civic community. And so we're very aware of that. So we've organized our work into 4 sort of buckets. And we've done this for the last several years because of the diversity and number of issues that we have to deal with. So we have one bucket that we call talent and workforce, which includes obvious things like education and training, but also things like housing and childcare and access to opportunity. We have transportation and infrastructure. We do a lot of transit advocacy, both as an economic competitiveness issue, but also as an equity and an opportunity kind of situation. It doesn't matter if there's a good job that you could do across town if you can't get there. Along with the transit, there's climate and sustainability. This is a big emerging issue within government and the conversations, and the employer community has to be at the table as those laws and regulations are being developed. Businesses and employers, we have expertise in how these things can be done, how we can all meet goals together. And sometimes if laws are created in the absence of that boots on the ground kind of information, they don't always work. So like everything else, it's helpful to have all of the advocates, all of the voices at the table, so that we all can sort of figure out what's our goal and how do we each participate to get there. And then the last bucket is what we call economic vitality. It's kind of everything else that touches how and when you can do business, create jobs, and create a good community.
No big deal, just walk in the park shoes, just the climate is changing, infrastructure, just no big deal issues.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. We never had pandemic on the list. And I will say, like, when I started this job, I wrote the 4 buckets up on a whiteboard, and I was like, okay, cool. We've got these 4 issue areas. And if anybody brings anything to me this year that doesn't fit in one of the 4 buckets, then I can say no to it.
Right.
Everything fits in the buckets. Everything. Yeah. We did not have pandemic in a particular bucket, but it is now in all of those.
Yeah, or is pandemic the bucket that you're like, right. Trying to make sure that you can actually do these other things. And
I think pandemic is the hole in the bucket.
Yeah, that is the hole that's in the bucket. The pandemic is trying to take down all the infrastructure.
Yes.
I really appreciate just that focus, because as you think about the issues that you've outlined, these are the quality of life issues. Mm-hmm. Being able to have, access to a living wage job, being able to get there, and being able to have your health. Your health is your wealth. And these are the assets and the spaces that you all are investing in. And all of those translate into having a strong business community. And so that's pretty just exciting to hear that that's your focus, and that it's just, bad every issue coming, that you do have a place that you're looking for some outcomes.
Yep, absolutely. The interconnectedness is the thing that sort of ties it all together, and it just, everything has an impact, and the business community, the employer community has a big responsibility, and can make a huge impact. And it's our decision as to whether that's a negative impact or a positive impact. And luckily, I know that you're people maybe all over the country who are participating in the webinar. Minnesota, I'm not from Minnesota. I'm really happy to live here, because the philanthropic and sort of civic engagement of Minnesota businesses is baked into their history. Sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. If you go back to Pillsbury.
Yeah.
Right. And even the railroads and some of those guys who, in a historical context, didn't always do great things for community, but there were some things that they did. And I think the interconnected nature of business and community here is like that's not a surprise. I remember there was a big story in like August of last year when a bunch of companies at the table, they said that they decided that they were changing what they were talking about, and that the point of a corporation was not just its shareholders, but it had a responsibility to stakeholders. And that wasn't a big news story in Minnesota, because that's so ingrained in the culture here.
It sure is.
Yeah.
That was, I think that was the business roundtable when they
business roundtable. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. It's so interesting. One of the things that I've heard, that when a new executive comes to Minnesota, the other executives, they do the niceties, and then it's after that, it's like, now where are you signing up? Do you want to do early childhood education? Do you want to, it's like your business is beyond the boardroom. It's on the block. It's making sure that you have some skin in the game in terms of the outside of your 4 walls, and that you're making those investments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just want to lift up one of the things that you said, because as a startup, if there's some of our colleagues in that space may not be wrapping their mind around your point that, like, you are the boots on the ground, you are the expert in your industry. And if policy is being passed without you, it can completely decimate the work that you're doing, And so how do you make sure that as you're building your company, that policy development and the public policy process is integral to how you grow? Because one change in policy can put you out of business.
Yep, absolutely. And one change in policy can be really bad policy if the people who are making the policy don't understand all the intricacies. And that's the thing. Elected officials from the federal government all the way down to city councils and school boards, they are not necessarily meant to be subject matter experts on everything. So that's where the community engagement piece is so important from business owners. We don't usually think of advocates coming from business, but advocates really do need to come from business, really do need to be engaged in the conversation, because you have information that is so important to the success of our communities and of our public policy, just by lending that expertise.
Absolutely. And it's just something that we scream from the mountaintops, is that your business is a policy business.
Yeah.
So as you just transitioning and thinking about just the very fact that here in Minnesota, you navigated like 7 legislative sessions, like not one, but 7. And the reasons are far and few in between. Mm-hmm. What were your biggest challenges?
Just having 7 sessions. Special, and the funny part was that in Minnesota, a special session is called a special session. Well, by the time
special.
You're right. It is no longer special. It is the not so special sessions, which some of us started calling them informally. This is the 6th not so special session. So just the spreading out of the work. I will say, I do this job year round, but we deal with city councils and county boards as much as we do with the legislature. And in Minnesota, the legislature is part-time. So it runs either, January to May or February to May to April, whatever. But it's really meant to be half the year, which also, the legislators do a lot of constituent stuff, and they do a lot of research, and they do a lot of committees in the off session. But nobody really got a break. And I will say, my friends who are contract lobbyists, and they are good people. We need contract lobbyists. But the people who are contract lobbyists who are used to putting in 70-hour, 80-hour weeks for those 4 months, and then being able to do the rest of their job the rest of the time, like that really was kind of an extra lift for them. But I would say, as far as the chamber goes, I think just having that, and the way that the legislature was trying to learn how to function without being in the same room, we all had to wait for them to kind of figure that out. And there were some things they did well, and there were some things they did badly. And Damola talked about bills not being posted until right before they were passed, or things that were being worked out sort of behind the scenes. That's not good government. It's just not. And I think some of our legislators would agree with that, and they would say this is not a good way to do things. I think the sort of pandemic emergency situation, they use that to sort of allow themselves a little bit of grace and a little bit of space. And I think some of us did as well. Like, okay, we get it. You have no idea how to function like with a flip of a switch. And so we'll kind of work that out. But looking into 2021, we've had time to figure this out, and we've had time to figure out what works and what doesn't. And the stuff that isn't perfect yet, we got 2 more weeks of 2020 to figure it out, because legislators are important, staff is important, lobbyists are important, but of anybody else, voters and constituents are enormously important. And if they cannot access what we're talking about, then the system doesn't work.
I agree. It's not just you're on mute. Like, it's not just that part of, it's really, you are actually governing to deploy policies that are going to impact folks' lives. And so how do you stay safe? And how do you provide that access in a way that people can give input? Because it's not just, I found the bill. It's what is this bill going to do and how this bill is going to impact me. And I think, related to this and that bucket around communication, as you think about 2021, how are you planning to inform legislators on what will impact members of the chamber? Like, what's your plan around getting into that process to be able to do that?
That's been a challenge, because you can't just show up for a 20-minute meeting or catch somebody in the hall anymore. So I think one of the things that we are really trying to do is tighten our communication, bring it back to our core values, and then repeat that message. There's a sort of comms 101 is you need to say something 7 times. Somebody has to receive a message 7 times before it really resonates. That's why we get so much campaign literature in the mail. Sorry.
That's why.
That is why, because yes, just the way the human brain works, you have to hear a message 7 times before you really get it. So there's a fine line between saying something 7 times and feeling like you're being really obnoxious. But I think that's what's going to be super important is with all of the other noise, with as hard as it is going to be to communicate with people, legislators in particular, they need to know what your core values are, what you stand for, why you're in the fight, why you're in their email inbox, so that you are top of mind when they are talking about an issue. And then they will either go back to see what you said about that particular issue, or maybe they will ask, or at least you're in their brain sometime.
I think that's great advice, being clear on those values. And so if you are out there and you haven't, made the time to get clear on your values, you need to do that. Yep. And I think the other thing that you hinted to is around relationships, around like they should know you, and how do you position yourself to start to build a relationships when you can't have that normal physical see you in the hallway, do exactly what a lobbyist do and lobby in the lobby. Like, how do you do that? How do you build those relationships?
I go back to 3 things. I've got a 3-word thing. It's social, surrogates, and self-interest.
I like that. Did you guys get that? Say that again.
Social, surrogates, and self-interest.
All right.
So social is in the absence of in-person. How do you use social media to your benefit? So that is follow people on social media and interact with them there. If you can't be in a literal hallway, then use the technology and be in a virtual hallway. Surrogates is find out, Chantira, if you were the legislator that I am trying to reach and trying to build a relationship with. If I know that Damola is close to you and you trust Damola, and I can have, and I know Damola, if I can use him as a surrogate to basically vouch for me and then make the introduction so I don't have to like cold call you and say, Legislator Hardy, I'm introducing myself, whatever. If it can be, exactly, if you can use a surrogate to help get you in the door, then not only do you have a little bit easier entry, but you also have the credibility of somebody that they already trust. Mm-hmm. Trust is huge in relationships. We could talk for a whole hour about trust in relationships, but that's a big one. And then the third one is self-interest. And there's many jokes about being an elected official and how you have to be at least a little bit of a narcissist to put your name on a ballot. But it's a ridiculously hard job when you think about, like for a state senator in Minnesota, they've got like 86,000 constituents, each of them do. That means you have to reapply for your own job every 2 to 4 years. And you have to basically make 86,000 bosses happy. So if you can look to what their self-interest is, how can you help them help you? Then you'll be more top of mind.
I love that. Very clear advice for folks to be able to wrap their mind around a strategy and engaging.
Yeah.
So in thinking about that and thinking about I love it, Shannon's S's. Shannon's S's, like we need to copyright that. As we go into 2021, what are the lessons of 2020 are you going to take in as you think about collaborating? As you solidify those communication channels, as you think about collaboration, how are you going to maintain those relationships? How are you going to think about there's always somebody on the other side of the aisle or on the other side of the issue. What's going to be your strategy that you take into 2021?
I think it's the same kind of thing as building and maintaining a relationship. Following your, let's say you have an organization that's completely opposite of yours, that you're generally on the other side of. So like, let's say you're working for clean water, and if I don't think there's a dirty water.
Dirty water. I don't think anybody has it on their business card. I work for the dirty water.
So find the dirty water organization and follow them on social media, so you see what they're saying. Get their sign up for their newsletter. Go on their website, look at what they're saying, because then sort of what messages that they are promoting. So you can either head those off, or what you're arguing against. Because if people are saying, well, yes, dirty water is completely fine and it doesn't do anything for birth defects, and that that's wrong, then you can start with the chemical in this dirty water causes birth defects, and here's the research why. So part of you kind of have to know sort of what the other side is saying, so that you can combat those. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. It's really taking that same frame that you have with legislators and having that muscle be what you train to work with folks on the other side of the aisle or the other side of the issue. And also, when you think about also your stakeholders, so it's really getting that same frame around the different issues. So my last question, as you think about, how you're going to make sure you're able to clearly communicate in a timely fashion in order to have impact, and how you collaborate in a way that your issue, which may be someone else's issue, that you're able to get it on the finish line. What is the thing that you're most excited about, if we can be excited, in 2021, knowing that we still will be navigating a pandemic, knowing that we still will need to push good policy? What is it that is having you just excited to continue the great work that you've been doing on behalf of your chamber members?
With having 1,700 members and 201 legislators and 4 gigantic buckets and all of these things, I think this is really an opportunity to go back to basics and really clarify our values and what we care about. I had a conversation with a member of my staff, and I will say our public affairs staff is 2 people plus an intern. So it is not huge. But I had a conversation because we were talking in another conversation about how work was prioritized. And I got to thinking about that. I was like, wow, how do I prioritize my own work? And I'm super I'm task oriented. I'm one of those people, put your head down, do your work, check the lists, check the boxes off the list. So, and that's not always the work that has the biggest impact. So I actually had a conversation with him last week. So for 2021, we are prioritizing our work in 2 ways. If it deals with a relationship, or if it communicates what we're trying to talk about, it's a priority. If it doesn't, it's further down the list. And obviously other things come into play there. But if you really look at relationships and communication, that's going to get you further than anything else. And I know, Civic Eagle is a technology company. And so that's one of the things that I was really happy about. We became a Civic Eagle customer before the pandemic, before the technology was super important. So I feel like we're a little bit ahead, but the technology of social media and email and text messaging and even things like this and Zoom and teleconferencing, these are all become almost overnight like the foundationally to what we do. So the faster that you can adapt the technology and adopt the technology, you'll be ready to go.
I love it. I love it. What I'm taking with me is get back to the basics, but make sure those basics are grounded in your values. And I'm taking the 3 Shannon S's of making sure that you work those socials, you work the surrogates, and you make sure you understand the stakeholders' self-interest in order to get things over the finish line. Shannon, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much for being that voice for business. And as we think about the very fact that a number of our own businesses here in St. Paul perished or had to pivot, you being able to be there to help them get through this pandemic is really, really powerful. And we really appreciate you doing that. And we really also appreciate you stepping up to be a customer of Civic Eagle. So thank you.
Well, we definitely appreciate the partnership. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna turn it back over to Damola to close us out here. And really just to be able to provide you all with some takeaways on how to prepare in a pandemic.
Thanks a lot, Chantira, and thank you again, Shannon. So great conversation. 5 takeaways for everybody that's listening in on the call. Number 1, develop a strategy, right? The way Shannon put it, you can go back to basics. There's positive movement that you can have by just going back and doing things like communicating with your stakeholders and just going back to basics in terms of how you implement that into your strategy. But you got to have a strategy. Going into 2021 blind, going into 2021 thinking that things are going to be more or less the same, going into 2021 reactively as opposed to proactively thinking about how you can execute. That's going to be a failure for you. So make sure you develop a strategy ahead of time and plan to execute on it as you go into 2021 and you go into the legislative sessions. Number 2, develop your communication channels and processes. I love what Shannon said about, the 3 S's there: social, surrogates, self-interest, and that kind of bleeds into the 3rd takeaway. But communication channels, processes are really important. That goes into your strategy. How are you communicating with your stakeholders? What process are you following to communicate with your stakeholders, as well as with legislators and allies and partners? So develop your communication channels, the modes in which you're communicating, and then the process to be able to make sure that you're effective in 2021. 3rd, connect early and often with your key legislators and allies. Right. So it's not just about how you communicate, but it's also the rate in which you are communicating. Start doing that right now if you haven't already. Reach out to your elected officials, reach out to your allies, reach out to your partners, find out what they're doing in 2021. What challenges are they having? How are they preparing? Connect early, connect often, keep that connective tissue with the lawmakers, with the allies, with staffers as much as you can. Whatever you were doing in the past, you probably, in terms of how you communicate, you're going to want to increase it pretty significantly in your outreach, right? That in-person communication is probably not going to be there in 2021. So you're going to have to rely on different ways of communicating, which will probably require you to increase the pace in which you do it. 4th, be flexible. This is going to change. Our report that we've published is something that we're going to continue to modify because states are changing their process and what they're going to be doing in 2021. So as that document evolves, you need to be flexible. Every state is most likely not going to stick with their current plan. So you're going to have to kind of keep your ears to the streets, know what's going on, and be flexible and making sure that you adapt your strategy, adapt your plan, still have one, but be ready to adapt it based off of the information that's coming from the states. And then 5th, and probably most importantly, stay safe. We're still in a pandemic. If you do have the opportunity to go to your Capitol building, to be on the ground, so to speak, stay safe, wear your mask, protect yourself. The last thing you want to do is to get sick, and which will prevent you from being able to execute on a strategy. So stay as safe as you possibly can as you go and you lobby and you do advocacy work if you have the opportunity to do it on the ground. Awesome. So a quick reminder about what we do at Civic Eagle. We have a flagship product called InView that will help you manage the 2021 legislative session. That's going to be mostly virtual, mostly remote. And our product allows you to discover, analyze, and collaborate on legislation. And in practice, what that means is that we serve government relations and advocacy teams with human-centered software that will help facilitate, improve, and accelerate your policy research and your lobbying and advocacy work. We've got over 60 customers and organizations using us right now, and we're here to help. St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce is one of our most favorite customers, and Shannon has been a great partner, so we're super excited to continue to work with them as we go into 2021. If you want to learn more about our software, about what we offer, please visit civiceagle.com. Shannon, do you want to share a little bit of information about the St. Paul Area Chamber and how folks can reach you? You're on mute, Jen.
See, it wouldn't be a good webinar if somebody wasn't on mute. So yeah, the website is there. My email address is there. Happy to answer questions. And I will give it a special little plug for the software. Lobbyists, if you have ever had to try to chase down your bill because it might be in an omnibus or it might not, this does it for you. I think like most lobbyists will understand exactly what that is, and you're going to get some phone calls. So again, happy to be a partner.
Thanks a lot, Shannon. Thanks for the plug. And everybody, especially if you're a business and organization in the St. Paul area, visit St. Paul Chamber. We're members of the St. Paul Chamber. It's been a great experience. It's been great being members. We love the work that you and the team over at the St. Paul Area Chamber are doing. So just a plug in the opposite direction, the other direction, to say, check them out, doing great work. We've loved being members, get a lot of value out of it. And you will too, particularly if you're in the Twin Cities area.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Definitely. And one more time, please visit us, civiceagle.com. Feel free to email me at demola@civiceagle.com for more information, for any questions that you might have. And for the full report on how state legislatures are adapting their operations in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, visit learn.civiceagle.com/prepare, learn.civiceagle.com/prepare. The website is in the banner that you see right in front of you. You'll be able to download the full report, give you some information that's really interesting. We're continuing to evolve and change that document because, again, the states are changing and changing their adaptation plans as we get closer to 2021. So thanks again for your time. Again, visit us at civiceagle.com. InView by Civic Eagle is our flagship product to help you manage legislation, discover, analyze, and collaborate. Take care, everybody.